So I'm back in the studio after my incredible elective in Australia, and I thought that I would make a video to help people organise an elective that was as good as mine. That sounds really cocky, doesn't it? Here's the deal, I share all my wisdom to help you create your own dream elective, and in return you subscribe to our channel and share this video with somebody else who is organising an elective as well. Does that sound fair? Cool. So the first thing is to decide where you want to go on your elective. So for me, I was travelling by myself, so it was quite important that I went somewhere that was English speaking and quite westernised because, well, I think if you saw some of the things that I got up to while I was there, being there and not being able to speak the language or having a bit of a culture shock I wouldn't have got back in one piece. So it's the first time I've ever left Europe, and it's the first time I've been away by myself. So you can check out how that went down. So I wanted somewhere English speaking, so that sort of narrowed it down to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the USA really. New Zealand, too cold at that time of year, so that was straight out the window. Canada I quite like the look of, but they wanted £500 as an application fee without even being guaranteed the offer of a placement, so I couldn't really justify spending that money as a bit of a risk, so I ruled that one out. And the USA is an amazing place. I've really wanted to go and do the Route 66 for a long time, but it's like $4,000 just for the placement cost, so I couldn't afford to do that at all. So Australia it was. And in Australia there's so many backpackers that even though you're by yourself, there's so many people to meet and it's sort of safe enough to do that. And then I decided to split my elective into two parts. So at Newcastle Uni we get 8 weeks worth of elective at the moment. I think that's changing with the new curriculum, but I had 8 weeks, which was fantastic. So I divided it into 4 weeks and 4 weeks, and I did my first 4 weeks in Sydney and then the second 4 weeks in Brisbane, and I had a week's holiday in between the two to drive up the coast, and then I had a couple of weeks holiday afterwards to sort of finish the rest of the East Coast and go right up to the top. The next step is to get Googling and find a placement that you actually want to go to and get that organised once you've decided where you're going to go. So a really good start point is to look at the university websites and see what placements they've got on offer. But the key thing to say is that the deadlines come really fast and it's first come first served, so you've got to be organised. For me, it was the deadline of the 1st of July 2018 to do my elective in June 2019, so you've got to get thinking about this really far in advance. Another thing to say is that the university ones only really offer hospital placements and hospital specialties, so I wanted to do one that was GP, so I had to sort of look elsewhere. And the way I tackled that one was I went on Google Maps and googled GPs in Brisbane and emailed about 50 different practices, and there was one really lovely GP who got back to me and said, yeah, we would love to have you, we're really keen on teaching and you can even come and live with us as well. So that was just the dream plan really. There was another one who replied to me, but he sent a one word answer just saying yes, that's fine, and I had a bit of a look at the GP practice and it was tucked away underneath some metro station, so I was a bit like, that's probably quite dodgy. So I went with the first offer and it was just absolutely fantastic. So it's important to start early and decide where you're going to go. If you're going solo, you might feel a bit more comfortable going somewhere that's English speaking and somewhere more developed. I do know people who went to third world countries and had a really good time too. And of course you can just stay in the UK if you want to do that as well. I think a big thing to think about is how much can you actually afford, because electives are expensive if you're going somewhere far away. So I wasn't really sure how much it was going to cost at all. I worked 2 jobs on top of doing my degree for the whole year before I went, so I could rack up enough savings to be able to go. And I thought, to be able to tell you guys how much it costs to get a good idea, I've tracked my spending the whole way along. So in total it cost me £5,337, I think. So I'm going to do another video on the actual finances behind an elective and how much it costs for each different thing that I did, so you can check that out if you like. So it can be expensive, so it's important to be able to look at what you can afford to do and plan ahead so you've got time to save. It's also important to think about how hands-on you want to get with your elective, because I went to Australia, that is a really developed country, so you're a little bit further down the pecking order because their training programme is a lot longer than ours. So there was doctors that were genuinely impressed that I could take blood and take blood pressures and do catheters, because the students there don't seem to be able to do that as well as we can, whereas for us it's just all in a day's work. So if you went somewhere that's more third world, they probably just want all the help that they can get, so you would get more chance to be hands-on. So for me it was more important to learn how to look after myself and get travelling on my own, so I did it more for the travel experience around the placement than the actual getting hands-on in the placement itself, but I did still learn a lot while I was there. And once you've secured an offer, the rest of it all just sort of falls into place. Once you've got your placement booked, you can start booking flights, booking accommodation. When I was in Sydney, I lived in the hospital accommodation, which was dirt cheap, £35 a week. Not the nicest place I've ever stayed, but for £35 a week, you can't really say no. And then when I lived with the GPs, obviously that saved me so much money because I could stay there for free. I don't think I would have been able to go abroad if I hadn't have had that free accommodation there and also such cheap accommodation in Sydney. I know people who did Airbnb or stayed in hostels or found a host family, but again that's a little bit more expensive. So when you're organising it, it's important to think about where you're going to stay as well, and if there's hospital accommodation that you can go into. You'll meet so many people on your elective, even if you're going by yourself. There's students in the hospital that are from all over the world, there's doctors from all over as well, and you've got local students, so it's quite nice to experience medicine outside of the UK and with healthcare professionals that work from all over the world. So I could compare with some of my best friends in Sydney were from Germany and South Africa, so it's really interesting to talk to these people and see how their training programme works there and how it differs to the UK and also to what it was like in Australia. So even if you go by yourself, don't worry about being by yourself. There's so many people that you can meet in hostels as well. Everybody's sort of there travelling. I think the only thing that I struggled with was the constant cycle of meeting someone, getting attached and then having to say goodbye again. But it's a really small world. I met people in Australia from my hometown, people that we had mutual friends with. I met other medics from the course in Newcastle, and I even met on the first night in Sydney, as soon as I'd just landed, I met a guy from Jersey, and then on the last night, 3 months later, I also met his sister who was also travelling. So it's a really small world. I just thought I'd finish off with a few top tips on organising your elective. I was trying to think, is there anything that I wish I did differently with my elective? And actually, it all fell pretty well into place. I think because I was so organised and started so early, it all came together quite nicely, so I don't think there's anything that I wish I did differently. So my top tips would be to start early and be super organised. Get your spreadsheets going, get your highlighters and your coloured pens and your maps with pins, and it's really exciting, the whole planning of it as well. It's stressful, but it's exciting. My next tip would be to be brave and know that you can do it, and because I was terrified going away by myself, and I can remember when I got to the airport, I'd just been dropped off and I put my case through, and then I sat down with McDonald's and table for one, and I was like, I am actually by myself, and it really hit me then that I was going to have to spend the next 3 months by myself, completely out of my comfort zone, no idea what I was doing. But be brave, and you know you can get through that, and you'll come back being so much more of a better person for having gone through that. And like I said as well, it's expensive, so save hard. That is another really important tip. Get a job, go to the bank of mum and dad. I know people who took out loans. I would probably try and not recommend taking out loans. You don't want to end up in a load of debt. But do save hard, save some money, and then you can go away and have a really good time without having to worry about a budget. And my last tip is, well, it's not really a tip, it's more of something that I realised, is that people are kind and people genuinely mean well. There's a few weirdos out there, but there always is wherever you go. But on the whole, people are nice. And so, you know, reach out to people, ask people to help you out, because people will help, because people are nice. So, in summary, you've got to start by deciding where you want to go, track down a placement, use Google Maps, don't be afraid to reach out to people, and email loads of people, just find email addresses, and you never know if one of them is going to come back and offer you the best placement you could have. So I'm really jealous that you've got this coming up, because I wish that I could do mine all over again. So you're going to have the best time. If you want to know anything, I'm more than happy to help, because it's really useful to have people that have already done an elective, especially if you're interested in Australia. I can help you out a little bit there as well. Remember the deal from the start. If this was useful, I think you agreed that you would subscribe and maybe share this with somebody else. So go and do that, you know what to do. And have a great elective, and good luck with all the planning.